This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Welcome to the broadcast, everyone. As you're watching this on television, the election for President of the United States has been completed. But a very troubling development took place during the election process, and that was this attempt to have UN observers, that's right, United Nations observers, at polling stations throughout the United States. Listen to the countries represented by the UN to be deployed at U.S. polling stations. Representatives from Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Belarus, Croatia, Denmark, France, Georgia, Germany, Kazakhstan, Serbia, Spain, Switzerland, the Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. You're asking yourself, why would you have UN observers at U.S. polling stations? Well, we asked that same question and have gone to work on it. And here was the idea. They were going to be there in order to determine whether U.S. elections, that's right, the election for the President of the United States, was done in accordance with international law. The problem is we have a Constitution of the United States that says you would do the elections according to the United States Constitution. Even though the election's complete, our concern, of course, is that this could happen again in the future. But I want to take you back to the days right before the election to give you a sense of what was going on. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. Days away from the election for President of the United States, and we've got the United Nations coming in saying they want to monitor and observe our elections. They include governments like Belarus. By the way, Belarus is run by a dictator. But the dictator said he was really disappointed in our electoral process here in the United States because we have the Electoral College, and he thinks that's not right. So we've got the dictator of Belarus's government telling us how we should run our elections, and UN observers wanting to come into the polling places themselves to determine whether we're complying with international law, which we think is absolutely outrageous. So does Greg Abbott. He's the Attorney General of Texas, and he's going to be joining us later in the broadcast. By the way, one of the countries that is coming in as part of the UN observing team is from the Netherlands. You know, this whole idea was, of course, in coordination with left-wing organizations like the ACLU, Project Vote, which is ACORN. I mean, I can't even imagine ACORN and the UN representatives are sitting down talking to them. That's another story. But here's what you've got. The country that's leading the charge, so to speak, the head of the mission is from the Netherlands. And their concern has been voter identification. Well, let me read you something here. You must show, besides your voting pass identification to vote, without maximum 5 years outdated, identification. Without identification, you cannot vote. You must show, beside your voting pass, identification to vote. That's from, not the state of Texas, that's from the Netherlands. So this whole idea, David French, senior counsel for the ACLJ, that they're, going to make sure we're in compliance with international law, they need to look at themselves before they start looking at us.
That's right. I mean, the hypocrisy here is staggering, but this was never about a consistent, good-spirited, good-hearted effort to try to ensure the integrity of the ballot. It's from the beginning. It's been about a political agenda to try to intimidate voters in the United States and to try to impact and delegitimize an election outcome that they may not like.
It is voter intimidation, pure and simple, folks. Call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. But let me tell you what we are doing. We are sending 50 letters by email to all 50 state attorney generals to say, look, if you've got UN representatives showing up in your state or in counties, you tell them, get out. Get out because you have laws in your state that say if you're not there to vote or if you're not a poll worker, you don't get within, Texas it's 100 feet, some states it's 150 feet. Those laws must be enforced. Now, we're also sending this letter to these attorney generals, and we right now can tell them that we have 33,393 American citizens with us, and with phone calls, probably 35,000 of you in one day. One day, 35,000 of you contacted us to say we do not want UN representatives monitoring our elections at polling places. If you've not yet signed on to this petition, go to aclj.org. That's aclj.org, or go to your phone right now. We're not going to have the Belarusians telling us how to vote in the United States. 877-989-2255, saying no to the UN representatives at your polling place. We're going to have a lot more ahead, including your phone calls when we come back, so you're going to want to stay with us. And let me also tell you this, folks. even though the election is complete, we want to make sure this never happens again, and that's where you come in. There's a number on your screen. I'll give it to you right now. We've got a petition to make sure the states do not allow UN observers in future elections. We want to make sure the U.S. elections are done according to U.S. law. That's the Constitution of the United States. Here's the number. It's 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. We're going to carry this petition to make sure in the next elections, that some of your states have elections next year, that this does not happen again. Again, 877-989-2255 or aclj.org.
It has been a disturbing trend. United Nations election monitors show up in the United States to actually monitor our elections. It's happened numerous times, and what's more troubling, they are invited and encouraged to participate by liberal organizations. That's right, the United Nations dispatches people to look over the shoulder of poll workers and voters in the United States of America. Several states have clearly rejected this voter intimidation tactic, and at the American Center for Law and Justice, we want to urge officials in all 50 states to reject this tactic. The fact is, the United Nations has no business monitoring any U.S. election, period. Stand with the ACLJ. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or add your name online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. And although the election's complete, we did a series of television programs leading up to the election dealing with the idea, this unbelievable situation where the United Nations were deploying UN election watchers at U.S. polling stations as if we're a third world country. And they were there to determine if the United States was, quote, following international law in its election. Now, if you think this is absurd, which, by the way, I think it is absurd, we're going to stop that for the next coming elections, whether it's for House, Senate, or even your local elections. We don't want UN observers there with blue helmets determining whether, in fact, this was a valid election according to international law. The laws of the United States are what apply to elections. You go to your phones right now. We've got a petition that's going to stop this nonsense. 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. We're going to go back to our program. We recorded this right before the election, so it'll give you the sense of the urgency of what was going on. Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. So we've got a situation where United Nations observers are coming in, and they want to make sure that we are not illegally violating international law in a U.S. election. Specifically, they're worried about voter identification, which is so ironic considering the Netherlands requires voter identification to vote. Okay? Now, during the 2008 general election, the same observers were turned away from polling stations in Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, and Texas. Florida and Ohio, of course, battleground states. And also there were some of them were turned away. Again, poll watchers also had difficulties with some of these individual UN representatives in states like Pennsylvania, Virginia, which are also now and Colorado, which are becoming battleground states. So, folks, this is a serious thing. We had a caller come in yesterday on the broadcast that's a poll watcher, or actually a poll worker in California. And she says it's intense enough, as you can imagine, just having the election for president of the United States, let alone having UN observers. Now, our television audience is here. You're going to be seeing this program after the election. But we can't have this happen the next series of elections either. So it's real simple. No United Nations monitors of American elections. And what we're saying is that they're going to states. They're not saying which states they're going to go to. The State Department has said that's fine with them. They have no problem with them coming in, having these observers come in. In fact, the State Department has said that they're entitled to, quote, diplomatic immunity, which means they wouldn't be subject to the laws of the United States. Well, number one, State Department, they're not diplomats. They're observers from the United Nations, an organization within the UN. They're not diplomats. Number two, it's not just criminal laws here. You can get an injunction keeping them away. So we're notifying all 50 states. But, folks, this is where you come in. I want to be at 50,000 signatures on this petition to the various governors by the end of today. So we're at about 33,393, probably 33,500 right now. You go to your phones or call us or go to aclj.org. You can sign it online really easy at aclj.org. Or you can call us at 1-877-989 989-2255. Now, let me be really clear here, folks. I do not want to see, in elections that are going to be razor thin in many, many states, I don't want to see any additional pressure on Americans on voting. And this is an intimidation tactic. I don't understand why we're just saying, why some of the media outlets aren't covering it. Fox News is, and so are we, of course. But UN representatives inside of polling places, that's not the way our laws work in the United States. Go to aclj.org. But every one of you, if you haven't signed this petition, this is critical for the integrity of our electoral process. Go call us right now at 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. Everybody needs to make that call. Fan, you deal with the UN on a regular basis as one of our representatives for our European Center for Law and Justice, which is an NGO within the United Nations. You know what it's like there. This is pretty much bordering on absurd.
Yeah, let me tell you how bad this is, Jay. I mean, these comments from the Netherlands and from Belarus, let me tell you how bad the UN is. I would not even send the United Nations to those two countries to monitor elections. They're that bad on this. But to suggest that those two nations can team up with the United Nations and come to the United States, a place where we have the freest and fairest elections in the world. By the way, Jay, we have peaceful transitions to power, unlike many of these nations.
Yeah, unlike
it's
Belarus.
Just laughable. Yeah, right. I mean, it's crazy that they would be coming here to tell us how to govern elections.
Well, let me tell you something. Belarus criticized the election organization, elections in the United States. Belarus. Let me tell you about Belarus. It's a dictatorship. I mean, it's a dictatorship. So the dictator is telling us they don't like the way we run our elections. So we're going to have the dictator. By the way, so when I look at who's coming here as part of the team, so to speak, well, guess who? Representatives from, look at the countries that are representative here. I mean, you've got Serbia, the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, the Netherlands, which requires voter ID. I mean, this is absurd. Then they've got representatives from Belarus as longtime observers. So this is nonsense. Again, folks, let's not have the UN inside this petition, inside our election process. Sign this petition now, aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. Back to the phones we go.
April calling from the important swing state of Colorado on line 3. April, you're on the air.
Hi, April.
I'm a poll worker, by the way, and I called the Secretary of State this morning to ask him about this.
Yep.
And he said, yes, in fact, they are coming. And I told him I did not agree with this. And they said, well, we're welcoming them here. We think it's great. And I said, this can't be constitutional. He says, well, you find somewhere in the Constitution that says that we can't have it. So I asked him what they are allowed to do, and he said they can do anything that any other poll watcher does. And I said, such as? And he says, well, they can look at poll lists and et cetera. And
they're going to let UN representatives and representatives of the OSCE to review poll lists, polling data as far as who's entitled to vote in Colorado?
Yes. And these two people, he gave me their first names, and he told me where they were from. They're from Bosnia and Denmark.
Yes.
And I said, well, they're from where? And he said, the OSCE. And I said, well, this can't be right. This is wrong. And well, we disagree, and it's never going to be changed.
Well, let me tell you this, though. There's state law in place here, and this is what we need to do, and I'll make sure this goes out. I'm going to make sure that the state of Colorado gets a letter from us today that says exactly this situation, that goes over this situation very precisely, because there's laws in Colorado, like there are in many states, that say if you're not there to vote, or if you're not there as a poll worker, which you are, then you don't go there within 100 feet or 150 feet. Every state's got a law of some type like this. But this is very, very dangerous. Now, the interesting thing, David and Than, is, and I'll go to David first, is we now know Colorado's a targeted state. And again, this is in context with Project Vote, and we also know Colorado is a swing state, so they're intentionally deploying at a swing state.
Well, exactly. And the answers that she got were puzzling and very disturbing. I mean, it seems to indicate that they were going to give these individuals some free rein.
Hey, April, what countries did you say they were from? Denmark?
They're from Denmark. There's one from Denmark and one from Bosnia.
Yeah, well, the Bosnia and Herzegovina is a person named Tomik Alexandra, and there's a number from Denmark, so we don't know which one that will be. And the problem is you've got, David, some states that are going to determine the outcome of the election of President of the United States are razor thin. I mean, the battleground states, and you can bet that's where they're going to go.
Right. And let's be clear here. It's not just that they're here. It's fine for somebody to watch what we do, maybe to learn from what we're doing.
They're not here to learn.
They're not here to learn. They met with hard left groups before they started engaging in this process. They've been coordinating with highly partisan groups. I'm sorry, that's not the role of the UN to coordinate with highly partisan American groups in an effort to delegitimize our ballot protection measures.
The whole thing is absolutely outrageous. The United States, this is the thing that I don't understand. Why did we respond? The United States government takes seriously Belarus's concern? Really? The United States representatives at the UN, at the OSCE, are taking seriously Belarus's concern? Belarus is a dictatorship. We don't take their concerns seriously. They don't be telling us about fair and democratic elections. It is a dictatorship. And our government is saying, we're taking their concerns seriously, Than. We got to really watch Belarus and make sure that Belarus is pleased with our election process.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And just to this point that we're making this up, Jay, this group met with the Attorney General of Iowa. This group exchanged letters with the Attorney General from Texas, who you're going to talk to in the next segment of the broadcast. This is very, very real. And what makes it the most troubling this time as opposed to past times, Jay, is they have openly said that they should not have to follow state law. They have openly said that they should have an exemption, that state law should not apply to them. Jay, they don't understand our federalist system. They're here to try to impact the election. It's pretty clear.
All right, folks. Also, Belarus, of course, a flagrant violator of human rights. I mean, the whole idea that we're trying to appease Belarus, I mean, is absurd. All right, folks, here's what I need everybody to do. We're taking a break in just a minute here. I need everybody to go to aclj.org or call us on the phones right now. I got to get you on this petition. We've got to stop this. We've got to let the states enforce the law. You're going to hear from Greg Abbott in a moment, the Attorney General from Texas. This is serious, folks. This is ridiculous. It's absurd, frankly, that we've got the Belarusians telling us how we run our government, how we run our elections. It's absurd. The Netherlands has voter ID requirements, and they're complaining about our voter ID requirements. This is like a bad Borat movie. I mean, this is unbelievable. Now, folks, we've just completed an election for President of the United States. And no matter what position you took on who should be the president and who should not be, there's one thing I think we can all agree on. The UN should not be sending poll watchers to the United States of America as if we're Sudan. And that's what they did. Now, a lot of states objected. We want to make sure that never happens again, that United Nations poll workers are not here monitoring U.S. elections to see if they comply with international law, which is ridiculous because we don't apply international law to elections. We apply the United States Constitution. That's how it works. We want to make sure that doesn't happen again. There's a petition. We want you to sign it. You can go to aclj.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. But I'm going to tell you, folks, make that call. We got to stop this, stop it immediately so it doesn't happen in the next elections for Congress, for your local elections, or for the next presidential election for that matter as well. Again, 1-877-989-2255, 877-989-2255, or aclj.org.
It has been a disturbing trend. United Nations election monitors show up in the United States to actually monitor our elections. It's happened numerous times, and what's more troubling, they are invited and encouraged to participate by liberal organizations. That's right, the United Nations dispatches people to look over the shoulder of poll workers and voters in the United States of America. Several states have clearly rejected this voter intimidation tactic, and at the American Center for Law and Justice, we want to urge officials in all 50 states to reject this tactic. The fact is, the United Nations has no business monitoring any U.S. election, period. Stand with the ACLJ. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We're talking about the situation with the United Nations, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and their idea of sending UN observers or their observers from these organizations. By the way, that includes Belarus, which is a dictatorship, the Netherlands, which has a requirement of voter ID. They're saying some of this is because of voter IDs. We're very fortunate to have on the phones with us right now the Attorney General from the great state of Texas, who's done an absolutely magnificent job on this, Greg Abbott. General Abbott, thanks for being with us today.
Jay, great to be with you. Thanks so much.
And I appreciate you taking the lead on this. You've sent a very strong letter to the Ambassador Everts of the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights within the OSCE. Let's lay out the concern first that you have for the people of Texas with having these so-called observers in your state.
Well, Jay, there are two concerns. One is that the so-called observers from the failed states in Europe have no business getting within 100 feet of the polls of the people who are voting in the state of Texas. It's against the law for anyone, especially anyone from some foreign nation trying to pry into our elections, to get so close to our polls. And they acted as though they were above the law. They didn't have to comply with the law. And so I just sent them a letter saying, listen, I don't care where you're from. You have to follow the law in the state of Texas, and you can be suffer the consequences if you fail to do so.
And by the way, most all 50 states have similar laws. In some states, it's 150 feet, some it's 200, some it's 50. But every state has what's called stay-away provisions, which the Supreme Court has held constitutional. General Abbott, let me ask you this. I know you got another point on this, but the State Department officials have made the statement saying, well, they'd be entitled to diplomatic immunity. Which, of course, they're not. Diplomatic immunity doesn't prevent civil injunctions, and also they're not diplomats.
Well, that's the deal. The State Department actually said that they don't have so-called official diplomatic immunity, but they had some kind of quasi-form of immunity provided by the State Department. But even the State Department recognized several things. One, they could not be, they would not have immunity from being forced to comply with Texas law. They would not have immunity from being arrested. So even the State Department recognized state sovereignty and the requirement of the OSCE monitors to follow state law. But Jay, there is a second point, because the problem runs far deeper than this. And this is what really got me going. And when I looked into the details of what this European organization stood for, they had basically adopted the program that was offered up by a group that is associated with ACORN. You obviously remember ACORN. ACORN has been put out of business for voter fraud. There's this new group that's affiliated with ACORN called Project Vote. And so we find it offensive when European organizations come into the state of Texas, adopt programs that are offered up by ACORN-type organizations to monitor our elections, and we're just not going to have it.
General, we've received some calls from a number of people just today saying that as they've talked to state officials in their state, in Washington State, for instance, some of the state officials are saying, well, there's no such monitoring going on. This isn't true. This is some right-wing scam. And of course, I've got the documents here. We're sending an email out to all 50 states' attorneys generals to encourage them to do what you're doing, which is enforce the laws of their state on this. But for those that think this is some kind of, this isn't reality, you talked about this coordination with the ACORN-related group, Project Vote, but you've had correspondence back and forth. The State Department's issued statements. Iowa's now issued a statement. This is for real. No,
it is for real. They have shown up in Texas. They are not showing up in all 50 states because another eyebrow-raising issue is what they decided to do was to target two categories of states. One would be swing states, and the other would be states that have adopted voter identification laws. And I don't think the state of Washington falls into either of those two categories. But, ironically, they're not investigating states like, let's say, Chicago, Illinois, or some New York City, or some other cities or states like that. But they are picking on the state of Texas as well as other states that are trying to implement vote integrity laws. And that's what's so troubling about this.
Yep.
We as a people in our various states are trying to improve the integrity of our elections, and now we have this group associated with an ACORN-type group. They're trying to undermine voter integrity in this nation.
Let me ask you one last question, General Abbott, because you hit on the key, which is the voter integrity issue. How serious if this left unchecked, what does this do?
Left unchecked, this is a pattern and practice of trying to decrease state sovereignty and state ability to regulate their elections and try to create more of a one-world type of environment where we're inviting in people from other countries, especially even questionable countries, to try to decrease our state's ability to implement voter integrity laws.
Well, we appreciate Attorney General Greg Abbott from Texas. He's a good friend and someone that's done a great job on so many issues. General, thanks so much for being with us today, and thanks for your hard work on this.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jay.
All righty. That's Attorney General of Texas, Greg Abbott, folks. We have got to take direct action because, as General Abbott just said, we don't know what states they're going to go to. We know Texas is one targeted, but there's going to be others, and it's going to be random. Let's go right back to the phone, Stan.
Yeah, let's start with Benny calling in from California on line 6. Benny, you're on the air.
Hi, Benny.
Hey, Jay, God bless you and your ministry. I am a Democrat, a past union official, and they are coming to California. We have actually met with the group. Their integrity is in question. What we're asking them to do is very simple. I was involved with the political machine here in Los Angeles, California, that has people running as high positions as Congress now. You have people who have been deceased for many years that continue to vote year after year after year. You have illegal immigrants that are here illegally that register to vote and are transferred into our polling places by many of these campaigns. So how can we stop that? Who can we bring in to investigate that?
Well, listen, if there's illegal voting going on, we're going to set up numbers where you can call your various state officials and report this. It's very important to go to the state election office, and we're going to have that information up on our website for Election Day, so do that. Now, listen, folks, I need everybody that's listening to us right now to go to their phones and call us and add your name to this petition. We do not want UN representatives telling us how to run our elections in the United States. All right, well, that's going to do it for the broadcast today, folks. As I've been saying, the election is complete, but we cannot have another situation where UN observers are at our polling stations in the United States. That is ridiculous. And we've got congressional elections that are going to be in 2 years. We've got some of your states have elections for governor coming up in just a year or less. Local elections. We don't want UN observers here. If you don't want the UN monitoring your elections, then you go to your phones right now and sign this petition at 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. We're going to take a stand against this, folks. We don't want this happening again. We've got our legal team working on it, but that's where you come in as well. We want to have a large groundswell of support from across the country saying no UN observers at U.S. elections to make sure we're complying with international law when, frankly, our U.S. elections have to comply with the United States Constitution and state law. 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org.
It has been a disturbing trend. United Nations election monitors show up in the United States to actually monitor our elections. It's happened numerous times, and what's more troubling, they are invited and encouraged to participate by liberal organizations. That's right, the United Nations dispatches people to look over the shoulder of poll workers and voters in the United States of America. Several states have clearly rejected this voter intimidation tactic, and at the American Center for Law and Justice, we want to urge officials in all 50 states to reject this tactic. The fact is, the United Nations has no business monitoring any U.S. election, period. Stand with the ACLJ. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.